I'm not completely against anything. And I have not, and not for lack of trying, and I think not for lack of being informed or interested in the issue, found a way that I consistently use AI in my work. I'll sometimes use it right now as a replacement for Google searches, and it's valuable for that. And deep research has been good on some kinds of preparatory work for me. It's very hard to not be outsourcing the part of the work I need to do the most. AI is better at the things I need to do than the things I don't need to do. And so having AI step in, which I will sometimes do in a crunch if I don't have time to like make the spreadsheet myself and like gather the data in the way I'd like to gather it, but having AI summarize a book or a paper for me is a disaster. It has no idea what I really wanted to know. It would not have made the connections I would have made. And so that is, again, to my stance on this as somebody who thinks it's the time I spent researching that was the most important time. Having AI do research for me is a bad idea. But, if you had other people on the show, they'd give you something different. I think somebody like Tyler Cowen has made AI much more fundamental to his workflow than I have. But I'm interested for the thing I will see that other people would not have seen. And I think AI typically sees what everybody else would see.
I guess what I'm trying to figure out is like how much. So on one hand, I hear what you're saying with that is the most important part of my work. And I agree. I think that the years have proven that out. On the other hand, I wonder how much of it is like prompt issue of can you prompt it in distinct ways and in all of that. I think of AI almost like looking at the world through a kaleidoscope. And I agree that the default prompt gives you the way that everybody else is looking. But
that's assuming that I know what my prompt should be. There's no prompt that would have told me, just go read more books, man. You're not there. You haven't gone far enough. I'm not saying AI can't be useful. Not saying it won't be useful. But I think I'm pretty against shortcuts. And obviously you have to limit the amount of work you're doing. You can't read literally everything. But in some ways, I think it's more dangerous to think you've read something that you haven't than to not read it at all. As somebody who knows the people at these labs and has like talked to them about how to use it and has access to the good models, it has not become an honored partner in my creative workflow.
Right. So then that seems like a pretty important fault line of there is your writing and you're like, it's not that useful. Then there is I'm doing research. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'll use a super concrete example. We're talking about homelessness as a housing issue. The kind of thing that is really great for AI. Like, I haven't really thought about that. I grew up in San Francisco, so it's like very near and dear to my heart, kind of watched the city get destroyed by homelessness. I would use AI to basically say, hey, O3, can you give me a list of how housing has changed over the years, list of papers that have been written. But what I'm hearing you say is, yeah, that's like a better Google. That's not, then there's something else of like, I want you to write this for me, and that you wouldn't use.
Yeah. Also, I wrote a piece about this a couple years back. It was called Against the Matrix Theory of the Mind. And I think I used to conceptualize knowledge the way you see it in the movie The Matrix, where it's like, I wanted the port in the back of my mind that the little needle would go into. And then I had read John Rawls's Political Liberalism.
Right.
I thought that what you were doing was like downloading information into your brain. And now I think that what you are doing is spending time grappling with the text, making connections that will only happen through that process of grappling. And so the idea that you could speed run that, the idea that it could just be summarized for you, part of what is happening when you spend 7 hours reading a book is you spend 7 hours with your mind on this topic. The idea that O3 can summarize it for you, in addition to there's all this stuff you just will not have read, is that you didn't have the engagement. It doesn't impress itself upon you. It doesn't change you. What knowledge is supposed to do is change you. And it changes you because you make connections to it.
What you're saying is knowledge is more embodied.
Yes.
Than just looking up something on AI. And then that, because knowledge is embodied, it has a way of becoming a part of you and flowing through you into the writing.
Yeah, into the writing, into your thinking. Not very much that AI has given me has really, it doesn't change me very much. I think that the time you spend with things is pretty important. And a reason you get changed over time. I mean, I've been reading Matthew Iglesias for how many fucking years now, right? Since he was in college and I was in college. In some ways, it is the length of that relationship I've had with his work that matters most. Any one piece is not that important. And, you know, when I sat down, I read a RAND report recently on housing construction costs in different states, in California and Texas and in Colorado. If I just had O3 spit that out, it would have been some useful factoids. It actually mattered that I spent more than an hour on the report, marking it up, like looking at I just think there's something about your process of grappling with something that is what that integrates it into the way your mind actually works. I think shortcuts often operate off of a misguided metaphor of how our minds work.
Right.
That again, we sort of have this download model. I'm downloading the information in. Sam Bankman-Fried is one of many tech people I've seen who would be like, what's the point of all these books? Like, shouldn't every book be a magazine article? And ideally, should every magazine article be a tweet? And the answer is no, it shouldn't be. In part because that actually doesn't contain the information. I can tell you that for sure, having written books. And then always thinking about how much fidelity is lost to them when I do the excerpts, when I go talk about them on podcasts. But also because it cannot change you. A magazine article will change you less than a book will. A tweet will change you less than a magazine article will. You may not realize that at the time, but I think for most people, most of the time it's true. It's a reason, by the way, podcasting is powerful. Because when they spend 2 hours with you over and over and over again, it's like what changes you isn't the wave, it's the erosion.
Yeah, the way this is also very vivid in my life is travel, where if I go somewhere, somehow that place just becomes completely alive to me in a way that it wasn't before if I just read about it. And what I'm really taking from you here is actually what a book isn't just giving you a lot of information. It's giving you a container to think about a narrowly defined scope of ideas. And that part of reading the book is obviously downloading the information, but the other part is just the kind of rumination that happens in your brain in the process of consumption and just thinking about what it is that you're reading.
And that's true for a lot of things. I mean, travel is a good metaphor here. Example, I mean, for me, reporting travel often works like this. I had a trip to Israel and the West Bank a year ago, June. And I remember coming back, and that trip was really searing for me. It was one of the most emotionally intense reporting trips I've ever done, the most. And I come back and people saying, well, I would get the questions and I was like, well, what did you learn that you didn't know going in? And in a way, the answer was almost nothing. But now I understood it. Or at least understood it in a different way than I had before, not in the way the people I was talking to understood it. You can have epiphany through writing. I mean, I know writers always love the Joan Didion quote, I write to find out what I think.
Yeah.
But weirdly, I think you have to be careful with that. Because sometimes writing is a process of persuading you of what the piece needs you to think. And you got to be careful not to become accidentally persuaded by, the formalism of whatever your own assignment is. I notice it when I'm doing a podcast. I don't feel a need to come to one best answer on something. And so I can hold a lot of different ideas in tension and end with them unresolved. And I often think that's a good intellectual place to be. When I'm writing, there's more of a need to chisel down to my one best argument. And in doing that, the person I always persuade the most is myself. Because I'm going through this whole background process of weighing things, discarding them. And I'm not saying that's not valuable. But sometimes I think afterwards, I over-persuaded myself. I talked myself more into something than I should have. I didn't leave enough doubt. I didn't, leave uncertainty. Instead of believing 3 or 4 things might be true or all were making a reasonable point, I talked myself into the idea that one thing was true. It's not even that I think I was wrong. It's just I didn't leave room for the opposite. And sometimes you need to at least be holding things in tension to understand, very complicated currents in life. So yeah, you've always got to be, I think, a little careful with the way that writing, particularly if you haven't done enough and complex enough work behind it, will persuade you of a simpler reality than you should really believe.
Well, if you like that clip, I think you're going to like the full episode. And I've linked to it right here.